Instantly, Katie is an astronomy student in Professor Jennifer Weiss's course. Okay, the next student is a student for my course, General Chemistry. Please come to the podium, Courtney Scott.
Out of your day to watch all of us present. It really means a lot to us. Today I'm going to be talking about the placebo effect. I'm going to go into detail on the placebo effect itself, the placebo effect with Parkinson's disease, pain and depression, and then the limitations the placebo effect has. In 1772, William Cullen was given a presentation to a group of his students on a patient he previously had that he believed there to be no known cure for. So what William Cullen did is he prescribed his patient placebo sympathetically, and William says, "I prescribe therefore in pure placebo, but I make it a rule even in employing placebos to give what would have a tendency to be of use to the patient." Which makes sense because in Latin, placebo means to please. So William Cullen prescribed this placebo not to cure his patient, but simply to please him. However, in today's medical industry, a placebo is used during almost every significant clinical trial to measure the efficiency and to further the understanding of new and upcoming medications and procedures. But what is a placebo? A placebo is something that seems to be a real medical treatment, but isn't. There are numerous different forms, from sugar pills, saline injections, or even sham procedures. An example of a study that a placebo would be involved in is a randomized, double-blind controlled trial. And a randomized, double-blind controlled trial is held to test the efficiency of medical treatments by answering questions along the lines of, does the treatment work? Does it work better than what we're using right now? What side effects does it cause? Does the benefit of the treatment outweigh the risks? And which patients are most likely to benefit from this treatment? However, with medical tests involving a placebo comes a placebo effect. So keep in mind that a placebo doesn't act on a disease. However, it seems to be affecting how people are feeling. When a patient portrays positive, relieving symptoms and responses, this is what is known as the placebo effect. Some people believe the placebo effect is simply tied to the expectation somebody will have on the drug and the test they're receiving. Previously, scientists thought that the placebo effect was purely imagination, and there was no way that people could be portraying real, positive responses if they're not really receiving anything. But luckily, with new modern technology, we're figuring out that their previous assumption is wrong, and that the body's own chemistry can cause effects similar to medication. So the placebo effect is being found and present in patients with Parkinson's disease, pain, and depression. Now, Parkinson's disease is a disease that directly affects movement. So you can get uncontrollably shaking hands, arms, or legs. It's caused by a damage in nerve cells to the brain, which then produces low levels of dopamine. Dopamine has the chemical structure of C8H11NO2 and helps in controlling movement and balance. So dopamine is produced when an active transport takes tyrosine from the bloodstream and concentrates it within the brain. Once tyrosine enters dopaminergic neurons, a series of chemical transformations occur, and then we have dopamine. So there was one study done in 2002 where they took a group of patients with Parkinson's disease. They did a baseline PET scan on their brain, which you can see on the left. And then they injected a saline solution into them and told them it was to help relieve the pain they had from their disease. And they did another PET scan following, which is on the right. And you can see from the lighter red in the PET scan after their placebo, that represents an increase in dopamine, thus less pain for them. In 2004, Raul de Fuente Fernandez compiled 3 different medical studies on placebo and Parkinson's disease. He wanted to compare these 3 studies and see how they were related. So he did one study on the subophthalmic part of the brain where action selection is performed. His next study was on the globus pallidus internum, which is the part involved with motor skills. And then the third combined the first 2. Each study had 2 different groups. One group received the placebo first, and then in the next trial they received the active treatment, and then the next group received the active treatment first, and then the placebo. So as you can see in that very first column on your left, that was the group testing the subophthalmic part of their brain. So the first 50 represents the average that they scored using the Unified Parkinson's Disease Rating Scale, and the lower the number represents the less Parkinson's disease they're having, or they're experiencing. So the placebo was 50 for that first one, and their active treatment was 27. And for that second one, their active treatment was 31, and the placebo scored a 52. However, the placebo isn't as strong as the active treatment, but we can see that there is some sort of benefit, and it is treating these patients. Now, placebo effect in pain. Everyone has a different pain tolerance and perceives pain differently. However, all pain is associated through chemicals, reacting it with your somatosensory cortex, your limbic system, and your frontal cortex. Scientists are finding the brain can release its own pain relief chemicals, and areas of the brain that process pain are showing a reduced activity after a placebo. There was a study done in 2007 at Columbia University. They took a group of volunteers and they applied a cream to their forearm. They told them that this cream was a pain-relieving cream when it's actually just a placebo cream. After applying the cream, they went ahead and rested a hot stimulus against it, and they put their brain through a PET scan. And after looking at the PET scan, they noticed there was a release of opioids in the brain where you control and interpret pain. And these opioids are actually found in a lot of leading medicines out right now, so Vicodin, Percocets, Oxycontin all contain opioids. And Tor Wagner, who helped run the study, said, "These results extend our knowledge of how beliefs and expectations affect the brain's neurochemistry and show that one's mental response to a challenge can affect the brain and body in ways that are relevant to health. Understanding these interactions can pave the way for new treatments that are informed by knowledge of mind-body interactions." The placebo effect in depression. Now, depression isn't as simple as one chemical in our body being too low or one being too high. It's a combination of possibly millions of chemicals being imbalanced. So the goal of antidepressants is to bring those chemicals back to balance. The regions of the brain affected by depression are the amygdala, the thalamus, the hippocampus, and the neurotransmitters affected are serotonin, dopamine, and gamma aminobutyric acid. So there's a study done in 2009 by Andrew Luchter and Elise White, and they took a group of 51 participants. They split them up into groups of 25 and 26. The group of 25 received an antidepressant medication, while the group of 26 received a placebo medication. They received this medication every day for 9 weeks, and were then measured the depression using the Hamilton Depression Scale. The results were 52% of those receiving the antidepressant had a decrease in depression, and the group receiving the placebo had 38% of a decrease in depression. So they both showed a decrease in depression. However, the interesting thing was where this decrease in depression is happening in their brain and how long it took to see this decrease in depression. So with the placebo group, there was an increase in activity in the prefrontal cortex of the brain, while with the antidepressant group, there was actually suppressed activity in the prefrontal cortex of the brain. And then for the placebo, they didn't see a decrease in depression for 1 to 2 weeks, while with the antidepressant, they saw a decrease in depression within 48 hours. Andrew then said about his study, what this study shows for the first time is that people who get better on placebo have a change in brain function, just as surely as people who get better on medication. These findings show us that there are different pathways to improvement for people suffering from depression. Medications are effective, but there may be other ways to help people get better. In 2002, there was a study done in San Antonio. They took 17 men who currently weren't on depression, or weren't on antidepressants, but did have depression, and it was 6 weeks long. Half of the group received 20 milligrams of fluoxetine every day, and the other half received a placebo every day. They did a PET scan before they started the trial, a PET scan that first week, and then another PET scan that sixth week. So here's an image of the PET scan on the sixth week. The top part is the placebo brain, and the bottom part is a brain of somebody receiving the fluoxetine. So red is representing an increase in metabolism, while yellow is representing a decrease in metabolism. So we can see that the placebo is showing increases and decreases in the same areas that the fluoxetine patient is showing increases and decreases. However, the placebo doesn't have as many or necessarily all of the increases and decreases that fluoxetine responder is having. So this study is showing us that placebos aren't inert, but they're not as strong as the clinical drug that they're using. There are limitations of the placebo effect, though, we're finding out. Alzheimer's disease is a disease that is associated with the deterioration of the brain. So in 2011, Fabrizio Benedetti, who is one of the leading researchers in the world on placebo, he did a research where he took a group of people with Alzheimer's and he measured the patients initially using the frontal assessment battery test. A year later, he measured them again with that same test, and he noticed that all their scores were dropping. And his assumption for this was that if their brain's deteriorating, there can't be a way for them to have this expectation and the placebo to be working on them. So today I went over the placebo with you, the placebo effect, how technology is showing us that the placebo effect is caused by our body's own chemistry and it's not purely imagination. And I believe that rather than dismissing this idea, we should work towards understanding it and utilizing it to make this world and medical industry a little bit better. Thank you for coming. Is there any questions? Yes, in the front.
I have a question. What the control groups on the drugs, we didn't discuss side effects. What about the side effects?
I didn't do a lot of research on their side effects. I was more interested in seeing if...
Do you know anyone personally that placebo effect has worked on?
I don't know personally with a real drug, but I know if you go into psychology, they're saying the placebo effect can also be as simple as telling yourself you'll do well at a presentation, and then you do well at a presentation.
I have a husband of 52 years, and when he was 23, he was diagnosed with a brain tumor. They couldn't help him, so we looked at it all. The drugs were killing him. The drugs were literally killing him. Analgesics were actually causing kidney failure, and the Valium was not good either. So I took it upon myself to look at other avenues, and he is he's thriving and doing well, and the placebo effect, as far as working with just giving you vitamins and taking away the drugs seem to work, and all the alternative strategies. And so he was given 4 months to live when we were engaged to be married, and we're married 52 years now. So I have to tell you that the placebo effect sometimes is worth a try. Definitely worth a try.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. Are there any other questions? Yes.
First off, I'd like to point out that your presentation was awesome and really good.
Yes.
And the second thing I wanted to ask was, I noticed that you said at the conclusion that the placebo effect, you said that you try to make it a better in the medical field, but is there a way to make placebo more efficient, much better than it is right now? Is there actual research and development that shows promises that placebo can actually be better than it is now or maybe 30 years ago?
It is still a new study that they're looking into and they're researching. Like I was saying, for a long time they thought it was imagination and it was a joke almost. But Fabrizio Benedetti, he's a professor in Italy and he's really interested in it, and I know he's been doing a lot of the leading research, so I'm hoping and assuming that there will be soon more information on it and it'll be more developed so we can utilize it more. Any other questions?